We all have habits, some good ones, some bad ones, but for most of us they're so ingrained in our lives we just don't know that they're happening. They're just a part of our way of life. This is fine for the good ones, but for the bad ones this can be really problematic. Do you have a bad habit that you wish to stop? Then today we're going to look at how to identify and stop a habit. Together we're going to define and understand how habits are formed. I'm going to lead you through a quick 3-step process to identify habits in your life. And then we're going to look at how to stop a habit and give you some hints and tips to be able to do that, which will hopefully lead you to a more productive and fruitful life. So let's get into things. So firstly, we're going to define and understand how habits are formed. Now, habits can be loosely defined as those choices that we're making day to day without really thinking about them. They're just a natural thing that happens. Now, habits have been critical for me to look into with my whole chronic fatigue condition that I live with. It's been a game changer really to get the right habits in place in order to live a more sustainable lifestyle. And I've researched and done a lot of looking into the whole aspect of habits, and 2 books that have been really helpful in this are The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg and Atomic Habits by James Clear. These were 2 books that I would really recommend to you to look at and use when forming and understanding about habits, and we're going to use those to help us as we unpack some of this today. So on to how habits are formed. And really there's 4 stages or 4 aspects to what we call the habit loop. Okay, 2 of these represent the problem and 2 of them represent the solution. And we're just going to follow what James Clear says about that now and what these 4 aspects are. So the first aspect of a habit loop is the cue. It is the element that triggers the brain to notice an opportunity for reward or pleasure. This can be an event, a smell, a sound, or an action. The second aspect or factor is the craving. This is the emotional, relevance attached to a certain cue. The brain anticipates the opportunity for change in a physical or emotional state. So those 2 represent, if you like, the problem. The solution, or the third aspect, is the response. It's the actual behaviour that is performed to elicit the changes that you desire. And then fourthly and finally, there's the reward. It's the satisfaction gained from the action taken. So those 4 aspects, the cue, the craving, the response and the reward, form the habit loop. And put simply, if any one of those aspects is not in place or isn't worked through properly, then a habit will fail to take hold. We will not get a habit in place as we want to. So let's look at an example and see how this works through. So let's go with a simple example of our phones. Okay, when our phone buzzes with a new text message, or we get a missed call or a voicemail pop up, that's the cue. That's prompted us to think, oh, actually we need to take some kind of action here. It's something that's changed maybe our focus from what we were doing, and you think, all right, there's something that's happened. Then the craving from that, the sort of phase 2, is that we want to learn what is in that text message, what is in that voicemail, what the person who rang wanted. So we're craving that. It's like the whole aspect of a fear of missing out. We don't want to miss out on something, so we need to know what those messages say. Our response is to grab our phone as quickly as we can, to look at the text, to look through the listen to the voicemail, or to call the person back. So that is our response. And our reward is that actually our craving to have wanted to see what's in that message, to have listened to the voicemail, or to have found out what the person wanted, that fear of missing out craving has been satisfied as a part of us making that response. So what happens in the end is that by grabbing our phones, if you like, is associated with the phone buzzing. And so this kind of this cycle, this habit loop keeps on going. So when the phone buzzes next time, we get that same craving. We know what to do in terms of response, and we know there's a reward there because we'll find out what we're missing out on, if you like. So that's a quick, simple example, especially relevant in today's age with our addiction to the phone. It probably explains our addiction to the phone as well. So how do we identify habits in our lives, both good ones and bad ones? Well, step one we've already undertaken really is all about understanding how habits are formed. And so now in our minds we should know, okay, we know what to look out for. Step two is really to then overlay this framework, this habit loop onto our lives and to have a look and see if it brings visibility to our habits. Hopefully as you do that, maybe look at a day in your life or a week in your life and overlay this framework and you'll see habits come to the surface. Now it's important at this stage to write them down because writing them down brings visibility. And perhaps at the same time, do break it down into each stage, the cue, the craving, the response and reward. Break the habit down so you really understand what habits are happening in your life and what is, for example, what's kicking them off, what's the prompting for that. So hopefully by just undertaking this simple process you would have put them all down. Now if you do encounter problems with this or the habits don't become visible, I've got a few prompts now that will help you in this, that will maybe unlock your thinking and bring the habits to a fore. So the prompts are as follows. So firstly, focus on the response aspect of the habit loop. Focus on your responses to things in a day and then work forward and back on that loop to identify what has led you to that response, i.e. what the cue and craving were, and then what was the reward you got as a result. The responses tend to be the easiest thing for us to be able to identify in our lives. Secondly, for bad habits, look for repetitive or negative behaviour from you in a day. Things that you're not proud of, or aspects that have really been harming your wellness or well-being. Thirdly, consider these other factors. The time when you do certain things in the day, the location where you are when certain things happen, who you are with, look at problems you're trying to solve and look at your emotional state. All of these factors help identify habits in our lives. So to put all of this in context, I'm going to bring a few examples now up on the screen for you just to look at. These are taken from some of James Clear's literature and books on habits and atomic habits. So I hope they're helpful for you. If you want to linger on these a little bit longer, then just press pause. But now we're going to move on to the next section in terms of how to stop a habit. So how do we stop a habit? Well, in some ways it's quite straightforward. We take the habit loop that we've talked about and learnt about today and we stop it forming. We break it down. We do all we can to break those four aspects or factors we talked about earlier: the cue, the craving, the response and the reward. We stop it so that the loop doesn't form. Now in theory that sounds really easy to do, but in practice it is very difficult to do. But what would I get that? What would it look like? So in terms of the cue, what prompts us to our habit to start, then you need to hide the cue. You need to hide it away, don't make it visible in our lives. Then the craving, you've got to make unattractive. Take it and just make it think, oh, that doesn't look good, so you don't want to progress with it. The response, you need to put things, as many barriers in place to stop you from responding to that as much as possible. And the reward, you've got to simply make it unappealing, something that actually I don't really want to put all this effort in for that. So that's the kind of thing that we need to go through with each of those aspects of the habit loop to break it down. So let's look at an example together. We'll follow on from the example I used earlier when we were defining about habits, and let's see how this all works through. So let's stop that habit of picking up our phone and satisfying that craving when we read a message. So in order to do that, we need to first look at the cue, and we need to make that as less visible and hide it as much as we can. So the easy way to do that would be to turn notifications off on our phone or to turn the phone off. Therefore, we don't receive the buzz or the cue, and we don't enter the craving phase of wanting to learn what's on the message. So that effectively kills the issue at source, really. And if we don't have the cue, then the whole process doesn't start. But then let's say that we haven't done that, and the cue and the craving have taken place. Then we need to deal with the response and the reward phase. So the response phase is all about making it as hard as you can for yourself to respond. So that could be that your phone's in another room, or you've put it in your desk and you've locked it, or you have to have a complicated password to get on it. The whole aspect of making it hard for yourself means that the pain involved with that is greater than the reward that you would get. And so therefore, if it is that hard, you just think actually the reward's not worth it. I really don't want to know what person has probably messaged me or left a voicemail. I can leave that till later and carry on with the work that I'm doing. So I hope that's helpful. It's just a quick example really to show how the process involved in stopping a habit. So I hope that's been helpful for you today. I will be standing with you as you are identifying habits in your life and seeking to stop the ones that are not leading to fruitfulness and productivity. I would love to know your thoughts on this video and your experience of dealing with habits, how to create new habits and stop the ones in your life you don't want to progress with. So please put them in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to interact with you. Please also look in the description below to take advantage of a free resource that I've put in there, a checklist on how to build better habits. So I hope that blesses you. And please remember to like and share this video, and also subscribe really in order to get more of this content first before anyone else. So be fruitful, and I'll see you in the next video.